what drives you to share what you do the way you do?
Look, my mother and I fought violently when I was in, high school and junior high, almost like marriage fights. Like I would make her cry and run upstairs, and to the point where my father would come home and he'd almost be at the edge of violence. But what that tells me is that, I was pushing back. It's always been that sort of like, I had enough incentive or something inside of me to the will to sort of like not be, destroyed by two pathologically selfish people. And I think that there's some part of the revealingness is me owning that space. Is that, this is who I am. This is what I come from. This is what I do. This is my life. That it's an aggressive act of self proclamation. But with my parents is that because of what I see as their irresponsible parenting skills, that they got it coming, and I don't have the fundamental respect we're supposed to afford them.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you because she knows a thing or two. So now she's gonna break down. So break down. She's gonna break it down.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik.
And I'm Jonathan Cohen.
And welcome to our breakdown.
It's a big one.
This is a big one. Jonathan, we are having someone on who, if he did not exist, we would not be sitting here.
He's our father.
Okay, so that seems a little extreme, but welcome.
He's our podcasting father.
He's many people's godfather of podcasting. And in particular, this is a person whose comedic and philosophical sensibilities fit very, very well with Jonathan and mine. If you haven't already guessed it, Jonathan, who are we talking to today?
We're talking to Marc Maron.
Marc Maron.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh is right. So I really didn't know that Marc Maron was a comedian. I knew he was a podcaster. He started podcasting essentially
before the dawn of time.
Before the dawn of time. He started podcasting around the time that Joe Rogan did. And for many people, Joe Rogan is like the guy in podcast universe. But what Marc Maron did is he took his signature comedic style and he transformed it into a format where he would basically, how does he describe it?
I don't know how he describes it. I would describe it as he should get a PhD in psychology because he was like the first person to do long-form, deep psychological analysis of his guests. And
himself.
And that's where I was going.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go where you were going to go before you went there.
We're going in the same place at the same time.
So Marc basically started gathering people in his garage that he converted to a podcast studio. This was 8 million years ago. And he began talking a lot about his own struggles, his journey, his neuroses. I mean, he's very, very honest about it.
He's got a lot of neuroses. We like them all.
He's got a lot. He launched in 2009.
He's done over 1,000 episodes. He's like well past that.
He's got 1,400 episodes to date. The podcast is WTF with Marc Maron. He gets 55 million listeners every year.
Wow.
I mean, he's interviewed President Barack Obama,
in his garage.
Keith Richards, one of his, like the person that he wanted to be like, he says, when he was a kid. But I know Marc Maron because he often does gigs where my friend Eliza Schlesinger does gigs. And he recently did a comedy charity special to benefit Worthy of Love, which is an organization that I've worked with for years that provide birthday parties to children and families experiencing homelessness. But he did this incredible show with Eliza Schlesinger and Sarah Silverman and Jeff Ross. And I literally said to Eliza, do you think Marc would ever talk to me? Because Eliza's been on our podcast a couple times. And she's like, you know what? I'm not sure. Here's his number. So I had to craft this text with your help, Jonathan. Like if you
please, Marc, please.
If you get one shot to essentially have the godfather of podcasting, who also is like so our people in terms of his comedy and his brain, and he's so intelligent. I crafted this text. I really didn't think it was going to happen. He was like, oh, I'm going to be in New York, blah, blah. He decided to come in and speak to us. We got him in person. This episode is so big.
We forgot to do the intro. It was so big. We had to come back a second day.
No,
so if you're watching online, this is like new outfit.
But in all honesty, he gave us so much of his time. It is one of our longer episodes, but he is just literally an open book. There's not a thing about himself or his experience that he won't talk about.
Stick around mid-episode. He starts to get emotional. You know what I noticed about him?
What?
When it gets intense, he starts rubbing his hair.
He starts touching his hair. You may want to watch this one. He's got a great head of hair. Before we roll the tape, I do want to say that so much came out of this episode for me and Jonathan that we're not even going to do a proper outro. We are going to essentially do an analysis of our experience with Marc Maron and the topics that came up as a separate Thursday episode. So please stay tuned for that. Also, Marc discusses in tremendous detail From Bleak to Dark, which is his new HBO special. And From Bleak to Dark is indeed very bleak, very dark.
Funny.
It's very funny. And he also talks about the death of his partner who passed very suddenly over COVID, and he decided to unearth that aspect of his life and share it in From Bleak to Dark. So we highly recommend that. He's got a bunch of other specials, and we just had a really great time with him. He can dish it and he can take it, and it's just really so exciting to be able to have you listen to our talk with
Marc Maron.
Break it down.
You made challah?
I did. I just
for
made
tonight?
It for his brother. Yeah, his brother apparently is a real challah connoisseur, but
How long did it take you?
well, this is doing the first rising now.
Okay.
I do it by hand.
Right.
Yeah, so I mixed it up.
So it's just the dough. You haven't braided it?
No, this is the first rising. Then I'll braid it, then it'll rise again. I might just do a circle one because he requested raisins. So.
60% of your time you live in the 1940s.
Also,
I cook a lot, though.
welcome. It's really,
Thank you.
really nice to have you here. We're just very excited.
Okay.
We're trying not to kind of overemphasize how important your podcast existence is to people like us. I mean, I believe Jonathan said, without you, we probably wouldn't have even thought to do a podcast or even attempt to do what we do. So we're
you get that, right? You get that
I've
a lot.
Enabled a generation of a spectrum of people to think they can do this.
And they're all wrong. They're doing it badly.
No. I mean, I think that when mine became successful, I think it was inspirational in the way that people were like, no, if that guy, I mean, you just gotta.
That's.
No, I know. It's more than that, but I tend to characterize it like that a little bit because there was at the beginning a huge wave of people just doing this, and no one can really account for why anyone gets through in this type of medium because not everyone can do it, but everyone really thinks they can.
Well, so
I'm sure you can.
Well,
and I feel
we're doing
that.
okay.
Yeah,
we're doing
of
okay
course.
for ourselves.
You bring a lot to the table.
No, well, thank you. You're talking to Jonathan.
No, I'm talking to you. I just met him. Go ahead.
No, so I was in the industry, when I was young, and then I left for 12 years, and I went to college, and I went to grad school, and I had 2 kids.
All before you did the TV thing?
All before Big Bang Theory. So I was on a show called Blossom when I was, a kid, a teenager. That was from when I was 14 to 19, and then I left the industry for 12 years. Uh-huh. And I had 2 kids, and I went to college, and I went to grad school.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to UCLA, and I did my my doctorate there. I studied neuroscience, and
practical.
Well, my specialization was OCD, so that actually, has become a pretty hot topic. So I'm kind of glad. But there was this little thing called blogging, and what I discovered is that, I was out of the industry. I was not exorbitantly wealthy. Like people didn't make money in the 90s as female leads of TV shows that people would think,
But you had I imagine a fairly odd bunch of fans that stayed with you.
Yes, but for me, writing was like, you'd make $200 here. You'd write for all these websites. Like websites were still starting, and like, what are these things? And
were you doing neuroscience things?
No, I wrote about I did. I wrote about the experience of being a person who never thought I never thought about having kids. And then here I was having kids and being a scientist and all the challenges, whatever. It's,
And then right back to shitty show business.
Well, right. But the fact is, like, for me, writing was the place that all of those thoughts and all of those things that existed for me my whole life, there was like a place that you could write them and post them. Right. And what ended up happening, as we all watched, is that kind of the world of websites and writing shifted and it became very financially oriented in terms of like what you can sell and what you can, So anyway, I ran out of places to sort of feel like the person I was had a place to live.
Well, it feels like writing has been sort of pushed aside entirely.
Right. Well, so that's why I was kind of curious then.
Yeah.
Podcasting is sort of the place where people like yourself,
sure,
people who have lots of thoughts,
dump
right?
your problems to the people that care.
So was that kind of, what did it feel like when you thought like, let's experiment with this format?
Well, it was a weird series of events because I'd done some radio in 2004. It was always a struggle to stay solvent, in show business. And I was not a big comic by any stretch of the imagination, no matter how many Conans I did. But, But I was at Air America Radio in the original ensemble there. And then that kind of, I got pushed out there and then I was out here. My wife left me and then I kind of was pulled back into Air America for a streaming show before streaming was even possible. And, I've been working with this same kid, this producer. I pulled him back into this show and I needed them just to give me enough money up front to pay off my ex-wife. But anyway, so this thing crapped out in a year, but we had these studios. And at that time, 2009, there were people starting to do these podcasts. Right. A few people were around like Carolla, Kevin Smith, Pardo, and, there were Doug Benson maybe, but there wasn't that many.
Well, and not every comedian can also do what
but it just wasn't a thing, podcasting.
Right.
It just, there was, there were people out there, but it was sort of like, what is this? Is it viable? And it wasn't. So, but I knew that I could do this.
Right.
So I said to the producer, Brendan, I said, can you think we can do this? I mean, you think you can figure out how to post these? And we just made a commitment early on that we would do 2 a week, no matter what, 2 different shows. And at the beginning, we were really literally kind of, we knew the night tech and we were just using the studios there because it was a liberal network. They fired us, but they didn't throw us out because we were still under contract. So we did the first, dozen in those studios at night, bringing guests up on the freight elevator. So it was really just by virtue that we both knew that we were good at this medium. My producer's a brilliant guy and he's still with me. And we just felt it out. And eventually I moved back to LA and I set up in the garage.
So just talk me through it a little bit. If you had to describe what you were doing, right? Because you weren't getting on the radio and doing comedy. What were you doing?
Well, I think in the beginning, I had experience doing sort of a lot of comedy and a progressive morning show in a way.
Right.
Though we go over that stuff now because in our bonus content, we're doing like sort of the history of morning sedition, which was the show. And there are bits in there that we could not do. They were not really, it was a stretch to call them progressive in any way, but they're great. So what I was doing, I think I was feeling it out. In those first few episodes, I had 1 or 2 guests.
Yeah.
We had segments.
Right.
Like almost like radio segments.
Right.
We had a few with Matthew, who was this kid, Matthew Weiss, and we did movie stuff, and we did, we kind of felt out all that format type of stuff.
Right.
And then when I got to LA, it became like I had a major breakthrough in radio. When you can own a microphone solo for hours, that's a great graduation into something. And that happened when I filled in a couple of times at Air America for people that ran solo shows. So I had a certain amount of confidence in it. But when we started doing the show here, it was really monologue, which was whatever was on my mind. I knew I wasn't beholden to comedy and that it gave me an option to speak about whatever I wanted.
Right.
And we'd have a guest. And then there was a third act for a while. It was usually an improv actor playing a fake guest that we wouldn't tip. And there's several that people don't know if they were real or not. And they were kind of great. Like, people like Seth Morris did it. Jerry Minor did it. Matt Walsh. I mean, a lot of the UCB guys at that time, 2010, 2011, were doing these characters and just improvising as a real guest and was great.
Right.
But that fell to the wayside. And then it became just an interview show with a monologue. What I was doing was really trying to reintegrate myself into my community, which was comedy, and sort of find a place. A lot of apologizing took place. There was a lot of me settling scores that many only existed in my head. What I usually say about the first 100 episodes, it's really me having, celebrities over to talk about my problems.
Well, that's kind of what we do here.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got it.
I think there's there's a real, at least, it's even though we do this together, there's a real loneliness of sort of like being here, with this microphone and sort of talking.
Oh, yeah?
Well, yeah, because I don't, I learned long ago not to really excessively read anything that people feel about what you say or do. Meaning for me, so it's I don't want to say it's a unidirectional kind of relationship you have, but he'll remember things that we talked about with this guest or that, and I was like, I'm sort of here, and then I don't.
Yeah, it happens in real time, and
exactly.
then it's as if you just had lunch with somebody. Yeah,
it's a good lunch.
Sure, I'm like that. My producer is pretty meticulous, and we only do an audio podcast specifically because that's what we set out to do, and that's what we do. But he goes over this stuff, very. He spends time with these things and production.
Well, Jonathan and Valerie are the actual
but you
those
go
kind
live,
of producers,
though, right? Or you don't?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, yeah. So of course they're going to remember because they listen to it again and a lot.
I just don't want to listen to my voice anyway, or look at myself. So
I don't know if that bothers me, but I kind of move through it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always amazed when someone comes up and they're like, "Oh, I heard that." It's like, "Oh, there are people listening to
right.
this."
Sure.
Like, it's not just something we're doing right here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was a interesting adjustment to make because as a stand-up and as somebody who's been out in the world doing different things, I chose to do a podcast that was candid and revealing emotionally and otherwise, and I'm very stream of consciousness, and I think that my interviews are. Also very, they're candid, but like I don't prep much and I don't, I just want to sort of engage somehow. But to your point, yeah, people have a relationship with you that is different than, being on TV.
Sure.
And it's different than doing stand-up. It's, you are spending time with them privately a lot of times. It's a one-on-one thing. And they know your life or what you make available to them.
Right.
They know your cat's names. They know your kids' names. They know whatever it is that you do in your life. And when you see them, they have a right to ask you about it. I mean, it just depends on how you want to handle that.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Rocket Money.
Jonathan, did you know that the average person has around 12 paid subscriptions that they manage? Think about that.
It's a lot of subscriptions.
If you think you're only subscribed to a handful, you might want to double check. Rocket Money helps you quickly identify and cancel unwanted subscriptions. This is something that I was always like, I wish this existed. Well, it does. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app, and it finds and cancels unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, also helps you lower your bills all in one place. Rocket Money quickly and easily identifies your subscriptions so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want. You just find the subscription that you don't want and you press cancel. Rocket Money will do it for you. No more long hold times with customer service. Nope, emailing back and forth. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as the click of a button. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/breakdown. That's rocketmoney.com/breakdown.
rocketmoney.com/breakdown. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Helix Sleep.
I have had my Helix mattress for a couple years now, and I sleep great. Jonathan loves his. My kids love their Helix mattresses. Helix Sleep is a premium mattress brand that provides tailored mattresses based on your unique sleep preferences. Every Helix mattress combines individually wrapped steel coils in the base with premium foam on top. Perfect combination of comfort and support. When I took the quiz, I was matched with Midnight, because I like medium, not too firm. I sleep all the ways. Jonathan, what do you have?
I have the Twilight, which is the best mattress in the world for me. Personally, I sleep on my side. I like to sleep on my back, and it is the perfect amount of firmness.
Helix mattresses are American-made, and again, they come with a 10 or 15-year warranty, depends on the model. They're recommended by multiple leading chiropractors and doctors of sleep medicine as a go-to solution for improving your sleep. Helix is offering up to 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/breakdown. It's their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix,
better sleep starts now. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Rothy's.
This spring, I'm looking to transition my outlook and specifically my wardrobe. And of course, I plan on putting some spring into my step with Rothy's, and you should too. With sustainably made flats and bags in every bright color imaginable, you'll be re-energizing your looks in no time. The name of the game is vibrant shades and fresh gingham prints. The colorful possibilities are endless, and looking good's only half the fun. This kind of effortlessly chic style does not sacrifice on comfort. I love Rothy's. I've been wearing Rothy's for years. I love the flats, love the booties, love the loafers, love the sneakers. Rothy's has dozens of options for color-rich wardrobe staples that you can feel good about wearing. And Rothy's are made to last. Every style is machine washable. They keep looking great all year long. And they're designed with the planet in mind. Everything at Rothy's is sustainably made with their signature thread spun from single-use plastic bottles, over 146 million and counting.
For stylish and comfortable shoes, shop Rothy's. Get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/breakdown. That's
rothys.com/breakdown. Talking about, kind of like your latest special also, that we obviously have watched. And we recommend everybody watch it. It's very, very, it's funny, it's profound, it's tragic, it's wonderful. But, we've chosen to sort of do a podcast essentially surrounding, mental health. The idea was we were breaking things down that other people need help breaking down. When we started this podcast, my mental health was really taking a deep dive because of this thing called COVID and the lockdown. And I was thinking, gosh, here I am, this person with a doctorate in neuroscience, right? I've been in therapy since I'm practically born.
Yeah.
I've been on every medication, given every diagnosis.
Really?
Like I have this whole experience and I have a therapist and all these things. And I still am like, why am I shaking and can't eat? This was in the, in the early days of like COVID, like what is happening, right?
It's terrifying.
And so I said, if me, like this person with like all this information, all these resources, if I'm struggling, right? What about people who don't even know the difference between an anxiety attack and a panic attack, right?
Yeah.
And you start hearing all these things, especially when COVID, like it brought everything up.
Yeah.
It just brought, so it's like, I remember I talked to people who were like, I'm having trouble sleeping and I don't know what's going on. I'm like, you're anxious. And like, they didn't even
trauma.
have the word. Exactly.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk to people who just were having a human experience. We didn't want to talk to people who had figured it out because, forgive me, there are enough attractive celebrities out there being like, here's what you need, here's the candle to buy to feel better, right?
They don't really have it figured out.
Well, so that's what I said. I'm like, we're going to get up here and we're going to talk to people. And, some of our earliest guests were like, we had Leslie Jordan on who like told all about his like crystal meth addiction. And like, we had people who wanted to talk to us about their journey.
Yeah.
A lot of sobriety stuff. And we talk a lot about the steps in the rooms in very safe ways here and some unsafe ways. But it just kind of became this thing of like, Matthew McConaughey showed up and I'm like, you have no idea who I am. He's like, no, but here I am. Let's do this. And we like talked about all these deep things. So, Jonathan has realized that it's not just mental health that we talk about. We're trying to have authentic
really
human
deep
interactions.
with McConaughey, or did he work you?
That's a good question.
He worked me and I loved it.
Yes, that's what happened.
But it really has become a lot of my mother listening, hi mom, and trying to piece together the things that like I never took her to therapy to talk about.
Sure.
Also, we probably didn't actually know what we were doing when we started, of course.
No.
But it's about your interests and whatever
right.
You're working through. I mean, I think that my podcast has always been about that. It's always been about getting to the core of somebody's disposition, their being, their creativity, and all that stuff. It's interesting to because I definitely am aware of where people come from and why. There are people I've talked to with different types of problems. It's not inherently what we talk about, but it comes up depending on the person. But I know I got another friend, Paul Gilmartin. He does a mental health podcast. I think it's if you're putting that stuff out in the world, if you're vulnerably sharing your experience with mental and emotional problems, it's going to be helpful in and of itself.
Well, this is the part where I want to ask, what was little Marc Maron like? Like, were you this at 5 and 10?
I think that there's a part of me that I think what I was at 5 and 10 is more present now than it has been. But look, I was my parents were very young. My mother was 22, when she had me. My dad was a few years older. He was becoming a doctor and she was becoming a professional anorexic. Mm-hmm. Born in New Jersey, but like I was the first kid and the first grandkid for all of them.
Yeah.
And
Were your grandparents from Eastern Europe, or they were American as well?
they were first
like to find out when-
generation.
okay, they were first- your
my
grandparents.
grandmother was probably born in Poland, but moved when
Okay.
she was 3.
Yeah,
on my mother's side,
Yeah.
right? But my father's side, it was mostly there was more Polish and Russian, and then my grandfather on my mother's side, he had been there for a while, but they were all
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But my grandma Goldie was a big fan of mine, and I think that because of her stability, I turned out okay. But I was a very much she used to say I was the happy baby. I was a very funny, laughy, kind of happy kid. In some respects, but I think I was very sensitive. And that's what I recall. There was an oversensitivity, and my parents were sort of selfish, but selfish in a way where they were incapacitated emotionally. They were not capable of nurturing or the selflessness necessary to be parents. But like I said, my grandmother stepped in for at least the first 5 or 6 years of my life.
And you have a sibling.
I have a little brother, yeah. He took, he got the brunt of it. So.
You lived in New Mexico.
Jersey, and then my dad did his residency, or I guess it would be, his residency, did internship, I think in Metropolitan New York. But then I think he was drafted or enlisted in the Air Force. So for 2 years during his residency, we were stationed in Anchorage, Alaska. So we moved from Jersey to Anchorage.
Jeez.
And I have memories of that. I've talked about the memories of because you could hop these cargo planes. Like if we wanted to go back to Jersey to visit, but they it was 1969, 1970. So there's all these body boxes coming back from Vietnam on these cargo planes. And you don't really realize it at the time because the pilot will let you come in the cockpit and it's cool stuff. But I remember Alaska. But then my father had a friend who started a practice in Albuquerque. It was a growing city. Yeah. And the guy convinced my old man that it was, the place to go because it was a boom city. And that's where we ended up. Yeah, and that's where I grew up. Yeah, from
Did you like
3rd grade
growing
on.
up there?
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, I've been to Taos, which is really beautiful, but it's its own kind of magic.
Yeah, but that's a magic that you take in as an adult. When I was a kid, Taos, when you drive and you'd ski.
Yeah.
But you're always sort of aware as I went through high school and kind of got turned on to art and music and this and there are people influenced my life. But it was a great place to grow up. I find myself, I felt like I was drawn there. I thought I was going to, buy a house there, but then I didn't know why. Because do you ever go there?
No, I mean,
So
I
you've
was
never
in
stayed at
Taos
like
years
Los
ago.
Poblanos or any of that where they put people. There's this beautiful inn and lavender farm, and it's a whole operation called Los Poblanos, which is like the highest end joint in Albuquerque. But the weird thing about it is, like one time when I was there, I used to see. I saw Rene Russo there once. John Hamm was staying there once. Like it's where people stay. If they're shooting. And
I'm flattered you thought I might have been there.
Sure, I mean, but it's just the place to go in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's down the street from where I grew up, and I know the family. I know the kid who owns it because I grew up with the family when they lived in the house that is now that place. But for me, Albuquerque, in terms of like all kinds of different memories, You could get your driver's license when you were 15.
Wow.
So we were like drinking and driving and causing trouble, young. And I had friends who, towny. It was, and it's beautiful.
Did you feel out of place? Like you're such a New Yorker. I mean, there's such a New York energy to you.
I'm genetically Jersey, New York.
Yeah.
Well, I always went back. My mother, we always went back. Several times a year probably to spend time. My mother, we would go back for big openings at the Museum of Modern Art and stuff to see Cezanne at the Whitney or the Picasso show. And stay with my grandparents and the communist great aunt and uncle in Fort Lee. But when I got there, in terms of being Jews and being in Albuquerque, I mean, it wasn't a huge community, but there was enough for there to be 2 synagogues. There was definitely...
This is the one we go to. This is the one we don't go to.
Well, there's a Reform and a Conservative, right?
I was kidding. It's a joke.
It's true.
Yeah.
Temple Albert was, that was where the guitar player was.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
What do you do? You want to go to church? You want to go to synagogue? But we were B'nai Israel people. But there was enough... There was enough of a community that we were dug into it, and there's one friend from 2nd grade who I met in Hebrew school who I still talk to and see when I go home.
I do want to ask, there's, you've talked about sobriety.
Yeah.
When did you discover that, there were things to do to make you feel different than you were feeling in ways that you wanted to pursue it?
Well, I think that like it was definitely in high school, and we were running around. We had a lot of freedom, and my parents were not very conscious or disciplinarian. They just needed us to call them if we were going to be late.
Yeah,
but that was about it. But we drank. We would sit out in front of liquor stores, and I don't know who these grown-ups were, but they would buy us booze. And like early on, the sad part is I didn't like beer, and I would drink hard liquor because, Keith Richards drank it. And I would drink like Jack Daniels from like when I was 15, 16, but I would get sick a lot. But I was not a big drug guy. There was speed around, not meth then, just pills and stuff. And weed was not as much, but we'd go out and drink booze. And then like later in high school, blow came into it. But it was then.
Yeah.
But it was also my heroes. Yeah. Like, I was aspiring to something.
I was going to say, you're a musician.
Right.
And how much of that felt kind of connected, that sort of musical culture and that sort of...
Well, I mean, I've been talking about, Keith Richards again lately. I was never a great musician when I was a kid. I'm much better now. And I never played in bands, really. It was not like a pursuit of mine. But I did identify with it at a certain point. But like, because lately I had Keith on, I've talked to him twice. And the last time he was on, he was wearing this hat. And I just kept bothering him about it. I was like, where'd you get that beanie, It's like, and I just really pestered him, and I was busting his balls. I couldn't believe it. Like, it's Keith Richards, and I felt comfortable enough. And I'm like, I really like the beanie, man. It's so much better than when you were putting beads in your hair. And he was like, it was something to do. I'm like, hey, easy, man. So but I pestered him enough about the beanie to where I found out where the publicist said, like, this is where he got it. We're not promoting it, so just shut up about the beanie. But the point being, like, I ordered this beanie, and it's a $300 cashmere beanie.
Say,
and I got two of them, and I wear them. But the funny thing is like when I was a kid, I started smoking Marlboros because I read an interview with Keith that he smoked Marlboros. I drank Jack Daniels because I read an interview with Keith that he liked Jack Daniels. I bought a Telecaster because he had a Telecaster, And now I'm 59, and I'm buying a beanie because he bought a beanie. And, but finally, I think I can honestly say I stood in front of a mirror wearing that beanie, and I realized deeply that I was not Keith Richards. And it has taken this long to do that.
Where did life take you after high school?
Well, it was weird because I was not good in school, and I was like, in terms of the evolution of who I was as a kid, I don't think I had a very defined sense of self. I think that when you have, kind of needy, selfish parents, you're denied a fundamental foundation of you. If your parents aren't capable of detaching properly in order for you to make mistakes and come into yourself, you become sort of this. There's I don't know, is the word amorphous? There was something, yearning. There was some part of me that wasn't complete, and it was annoying. Because like even in high school, I kind of gravitated towards this guy who owned a bookstore who was, I was funny, and I was, I wasn't a weirdo. But that guy guided me in a real way, Gus Blaisdell, who owned the Living Batch bookstore. But the point being that when I left for college, I really didn't have a good sense of who I was. And I don't think anyone does. But I didn't want to go to college, and I fucked up in high school, and it was a real scramble. Like I didn't have the grades for it, and then my senior year of high school, I panicked, and I applied myself, and I got the A's necessary, but not enough to get my GPA up to the point. And I was applying places like community colleges and stuff, but my parents had bread, so I could go. So ultimately, I got accepted at this strange kind of liberal arts school that was primarily known for its program for dyslexic kids, but they let a certain amount of kind of upper middle class fuck ups get in. So, it was called Curry College. So I went to Curry College in Milton, Mass, which was about 20 miles outside of Boston, not too far from Mattapan. And I did a year there, and I transferred to BU. So college me was, more actively drinking, definitely moving through my towny roots and my arty roots. Like I always carried a sort of dichotomy of like, growing up in a very towny way, but also like because I worked at a bagel place across from the college, I was sort of around college kids a lot. And the guy next door who worked at the record store, a guy named Steve LaRue, who turned me on to this world of experimental music and stuff. Like I was taken along because my mother was a painter and also had artsy friends, and there was an arty scene there. But I always had these two worlds working. There was also like New York Jew, but there was this New Mexico arty, but still a good firm towny foundation that was all moving through me at all times.
Did you know you wanted to sort of be a comic? Did you?
Yes, I think that like from very early on, it was something that I had a tremendous amount of respect for.
Who did you like?
When I was a kid,
Yeah.
I mean, I like my grandmother was a big comedy fan, but also I just like the old Jewish guys. I mean, my parents took me to see Jackie Vernon when I was like 11
God.
because like I wanted to so badly, and he played at the lounge at the Hilton Hotel in Albuquerque, and they brought me there. I was way too young, and we were right up front to see this fat, sweaty man do his like slideshow shtick. But I was like thrilled. So I always loved comedians. Rickles, Buddy Hackett were important to me. And then, like, I had comedy records when I was a kid. I had, most of the Carlins. I had the Pryor. I had Steve Martin. Cheech and Chong was, more important than I think most people admit. They were fucking hilarious. And then, like, I don't know. It was always a part of my life. But I always sort of saw them as, guys who have made sense of the world. Like, these are the guys that know what's going on. Like, I was talking to somebody else recently, and like, I really thought that comedy was, you could contextualize everything with comedy, things that are daunting, and you can just make it funny and make sense of it. I really thought they had a handle on things. And like, now that I am one, I'm like, they don't.
Right.
They just but a lot of them do. But the point is, yes, there was some part of me that knew I wanted to do it, but I had other things. Like, I've always been this guy that, I'm going to get the things I want to get done somehow, one way or the other, and without being too crazy about it. Like, when I got to college, there were things I wanted to do, like I wanted to act, I wanted to write, I wanted to, direct plays. I wanted to do all these things, and somehow or another I did them. When I transferred to BU, I was an English major, and I somehow wormed my way out of my language requirement. By taking a proficiency test. I graduated with honors, but it was only because I cobbled together enough stuff. Like, I was there 5 years. I did 5 years undergrad. And like, it was just, and I did not, my concentration was romantic literature, but the class was just too early that year. So I could not wrap my mind around Byron, Shelley, Yeats, or any of them. Yeats. But I minored in film studies. And that was interesting, film crit. It was an art history thing. And I did a year survey in the history of photography, which really changed the way I saw the world. That more than anything, oddly.
Can you say more?
Sure. It was a history of photography. It was an art history class. And in the first semester, it was a year-long class. The teacher, this guy, Carl Chiarenza, who was a minor abstract photographer himself, but he was kind of a tough guy. But he started the history of photography class at the cave painting. So like the entire first year was leading up to the introduction of photography through ways of seeing, through, the camera obscura and, from the way of seeing. And the notion of, of that, the evolution of like, for me, the arguments that they have around whether or not some of the Flemish painters, because they were looking through camera obscuras, were actually painting from reality. To me, it was just sort of mind-blowing. And then that, dealing with the idea of images in advertising, and then the argument around, whether photography was art, and, the two schools of photographic art being documentary and art photography, and then just having to establish that shit. It was all like kind of mind-blowing to me. So it informed a lot, more than a lot of things in college.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by BetterHelp.
Jonathan, you remember that thing I told you that I learned about myself just yesterday?
Yeah, yes, I do, because I listen every time you talk to me.
Well, what I realized is that getting to know yourself, it never stops. It's a lifelong process. I'm learning things all the time. We are always growing and changing. And therapy is about deepening self-awareness and understanding. Sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk it through. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you're starting. If you're thinking of trying therapy,
please give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Jonathan and I talk all the time about how therapy has been a total game changer. We cannot recommend highly enough that you start learning more about yourself from where you're at now. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/break to get 10% off your first month.
That's betterhelp.com/break. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Ritual.
Jonathan, do you know who's kind of a hot mess?
A lot of people are a big mess.
I'm going to go ahead and venture to say, like everyone, perfection's an illusion. Let's give it up already. This is coming from a vitamin and supplement company. Ritual knows it's basically impossible to get all the nutrients you need from your diet 100% of the time. So they've made this multivitamin that helps you focus on what's important, like filling key nutrient gaps to support foundational health. It's easy and painless to incorporate Ritual products into your daily routine. We do it, and I love that they're vegan friendly, so that is a big plus for me. Ritual's Essential for Women 18 Plus is one of the few women's multis that's USP verified, meaning what's on the label is what's in the formula. It's also soy-free, gluten-free, vegan friendly, as I mentioned, and formulated without GMOs. A minty essence in every bottle keeps things fresh, helps make taking your multis every day actually enjoyable. Instead of striving for perfect health, aim for supporting foundational health. Great news, Ritual is offering our listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Go to ritual.com/breakdown to start Ritual or add Essential for Women 18 Plus to your subscription today.
Did your parents have any expectations for you of what you should be doing?
I don't know. Like my dad was like kind of, I wouldn't say he's emotionally detached, but he's definitely aggressively into his own trip, you know. And my mother was sort of like the financier of my adventures. They didn't have, no. I think the first
Like,
year.
did they want you to be a doctor? Was that a thing?
Well, I thought I should because my dad was. And like the first year of college at Curry.
You're very bright.
Huh?
You're very bright.
Yeah, well, I got that, you know, and there was those thoughts about that stuff. But I didn't really know how to live life. So I didn't know how to have any discipline around seeing a future or organizing my thoughts or like, you know, being deliberate about how one, you know, structures a life or an education around a means to an end. I just didn't have the ability to compartmentalize, and I still don't. So, but the first year of college, I did, you know, excel and really put a lot of study into biology and the idea of pre-med, and I did well. But, you know, I didn't, you know, I don't know. Once I got like the 3.5, 3.7 or whatever first year, I was sort of like, all right, okay. So that's that, you know.
Were you in therapy at any point?
Different times.
Okay, but I mean, like, what's the earliest you went to therapy?
When I was probably junior high.
Uh-huh.
Ron Carey. Was it Ron Carey or Dr. Carey? Dr. Carey. He was like the guy, you know. He was like the hip guy for troubled teens, you know.
We have him on the line, actually. He wants to call in.
I'd love to talk to him.
Did you ask to go to him? Did someone else suggest strongly
No, I
you
had
go?
problems in school. You know, I was, you know, I could not connect, and I was had, you know, like there was always the issue of like he's bright, but he's unmotivated. What's the problem? And I just could not. I don't know. I really think it was a tremendous failure on behalf of my parents to provide, you know, any sort of stability or emotional support in the way on an emotional level. Certainly they had money and I had a house and they bought me a car or whatever. But I just was, you know, out in the world without sort of definition or guidance in a lot of ways. And they were just didn't know how to do it. So I think I kind of went to school expecting all that and I acted out in some ways. And I was just so busy trying to have friends of certain types.
A lot of this stuff, though, and I think that's also a lot of the real, you know, kind of joy. It's kind of a weird word, but the joy of kind of watching you and you know, learning about how your brain works is like there's a tremendous amount of introspection. And I'm assuming that at the time that you were in junior high or high school, you may not have had that awareness about what was actually going on with your parents. So I'm curious where the awareness that you have now, was that something that came later in life?
Well, I mean, I was aware of some things.
Like, it's hard to kind of put your, I mean, we have very similar stories.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, for me, like, I never really put my finger on it, you know, meaning it was like, oh, my life
no, that's
keeps...
been the evolution.
Right. So that's what I'm curious. Was there...
Well, there's different frameworks to understanding, right? So I think as you get older and, you're going to choose, either whatever you learn in therapy or whatever readings you do to sort of contextualize your experience so you can have a handle on who you are. I mean, there's no one thing that, it's like religion or anything else or philosophy. Like, psychology in general are templates and either going to fit it or not. But I think, but a couple have blown my mind over time, but one fairly recently. But when I was younger, I knew, what did I know? My father was volatile and odd, and it turns out he was kind of bipolar, and he was a surgeon, so there was a lot of that kind of he's not here, he's, saving lives or whatever, but he's not, he's orthopedic.
My dad was a teacher, it kind of felt like the same weight was given to it. Like, I'm saving lives every day.
Exactly. Don't you know what I do? Yeah.
Right.
But I didn't get the guilt thing. He was just off on his own trip, and my mother was hypersexualized, to the point where it was uncomfortable. And, flirting with my friends. And there's always been this, my line is really that I don't see them as parents. I see them as these people I grew up with that had problems. Mm-hmm. But as they both get older, I'm still very uncomfortable with my mother's emotional range and, and who she is in terms of that. And my father is now beginning to have dementia. But I have peace with all of it. But I feel like there was something odd about them early on. Mm-hmm. Either because of their permissiveness, but also their kind of strange detachment and lack of focus. There was, my mother could never do basic things. Like the thing I recently think about is if she made me lunch, kids, parents, they know how to make a sandwich and put it in a fucking bag, and then you get the nice lunch. I'm obsessed with that size of bag.
Yeah.
The lunch bag. But because the reason is that my mother, when you have the lunch bag, you fold it nice and you carry it. My mother would just squinch it. and it was and she just, every time, it was just this weird handle of crushed paper. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And then the sandwich was always gross because she didn't know how to make a peanut butter and it was because she had eating disorder and she didn't give a shit. When I was in Cub Scouts and she had to sew the patches on, she was just sort of like, I'm being creative. I'm like, no, there's a way to do it.
There's a level of revealing that you choose to be, especially this last special. It's like, it's very, there is a level of choice that you make.
Yeah.
What drives you to share what you do the way you do?
I still feel like the journey to self, which, was fractured for me. I mean, I would argue that there's a possibility that I may have been a borderline personality disorder person when I was younger. Because my dad is there's something wrong with him. And, it was never clear if it was bipolar or mania or whatever, or narcissism, but it's a little bit of all of them.
It's usually not just one thing.
But, but look, I whatever I have, I had the fortitude to survive. So, and the quest was to define myself, right? So I used to do a joke on stage I could never make work where I'd say, I really think for the first 9 years of my life, my mother just saw me as her fat.
Yeah.
If she could just, if she just ate less, maybe the kid would disappear. Because how many times can we go to the husky section and I have any self-worth? But literally, I was counting calories. I lost my freshman year of college. I got down to 169 pounds just so I could go look, Mom, I'm emaciated. But
it's too much.
I know, dude. Look, my mother and I fought violently when I was in, high school and junior high, almost like marriage fights. I would make her cry and run upstairs, and to the point where my father would come home and he'd almost be at the edge of violence. But what that tells me is that, I was pushing back. It's always been that sort of I had enough incentive or something inside of me to the will to sort of not be, destroyed by two pathologically selfish people. And I think that there's some part of the revealingness is me owning that space. Is that, this is who I am, this is what I come from, this is what I do, this is my life. That it's an aggressive act of self proclamation, really. And also And I insist that there's a common that other people can relate to it. But I also I've done hurtful shit about my parents. You have to, kind of navigate that stuff. Is that like, I know, like doing the podcast the way I do it, that there was a point where I stopped talking about my relationships because they all end one way or the other, whether it's breakup or death, for fuck's sake. Yeah. So like there comes a point where one lunatic that I was with for years, was like, you can talk about me, but I can't respond. So it's not fair.
Sure.
So that's different. Yeah, okay, you have your perception. That's your perception. Even if you're telling the truth, there's still another side to it. And they can't tell their truth. But that's not my fucking problem on some level. But I'll honor that because I understand that. But with my parents is that because of what I see as their irresponsible parenting skills, that they got it coming, and I don't have the fundamental respect we're supposed to afford them.
It's fascinating to me. I mean, I find it really inspiring. I mean, I do. I think it's really inspiring. I think it's a lot of what fuels, I think, a lot of the attachment that people have to you when they hear you share your truth.
These themes have always been in the specials and in my comedy, but that one joke in terms of like, where is young Mark, or what did that kid become? That joke where I say, like, I don't like when people my age tell me, aren't you too old to still be mad at your parents? And then that tone I take when I go, no, they did it. So, but it's gotten a lot rougher than that. But fortunately for me, like I'm a little, I've definitely gone too far with both of them. And but I've done it to their face,
sure,
and I've done it on stage. And they're selfish enough to be somewhat flattered by it. The joke I have about it is that my dad was like a depressive, so like he'd go through these extended periods where he'd be sort of in bed, and my mother would say, "Why don't you go upstairs and make him laugh? You're the only one that can." But there's a certain amount of truth to that, and I can bust his balls right to his face. I did all the material that's on this special, and any time I've talked about him and his wife have come and seen that stuff. And he loves it. I like the last time, he's got a little dementia now. He's not going to remember it as well as he used to. But it was so funny because his wife, who's this born again Christian Latino woman, who I don't believe in Jesus, but we all thank Jesus every day for Rosie, because she's still dealing with the old guy. But like I'll really rip him to shreds. I was at the Ice House once, and they were out here, and he came to see it, and it just went on for half an hour, and the people in the audience knew he was in the room, and I was going at him. And like Rosie always comes up afterwards with him, and she's like, "Oh, that was so funny. I wish you did more." I'm like, "Do you want me to punch him? I'll punch you." So I have an understanding with them to a degree, but they don't when you have narcissistic parents, you're an appendage. So
Also, it's very unusual to have two narcissistic parents, and I've talked about this. Oftentimes, you'll have a narcissist and then, kind of an enabler.
Codependent, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very special.
I don't think my mother's narcissistic. She's addictive thing.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying when there's a flavor of that with both, it leads to a lot of kind of exactly what you described. This kind
rudderless,
of floating. It's you're kind of like there's not a real.
You've got to build you.
Correct.
And it's going to take
the scaffold is the way sort of my therapist describes it. Like there's not really a scaffold. The reason that people do intensive, kind of psychotherapy and like why that became sort of de rigueur. It's trying to form a scaffold, that was kind of not there.
It's weird, yeah, because like I was so like I really think that most of my search, in terms of mentors and also in show business, not in show business, but my weird connection to actors and comics as a kid, and my I think it was all an attempt to be parented, and I think to some degree effective. Like I don't know. I don't quite jive with the scaffolding notion, but I do jive with the idea that you sort of emulate and see what sticks until you become who you are. Mm-hmm. And I've emulated a lot of certainly people and fashion choices and this, that, or the other thing, and I've chosen a lot of men, both some bad and some good, to be father figures to a degree, and I've chosen a lot of women, some dangerous, some not, to be emotional supports. But I was not. Here's the biggest problem. I don't mean to cut you off. When you have these, these type of parents is that you do not know how to receive or give love properly.
Let's have a full stop there. Because I kind of feel like that needs a little room to breathe. So what I usually say is I have trust issues. I don't trust men and I don't trust women. That's the issue. But that's a full stop. I'm curious, did you have relationships as a teenager? Did you?
Sure.
Was there something fulfilling there?
Like I saw porn too young, and it set a standard in my head that was daunting, caused me a lot of anxiety. Took me many years to be able to do that.
Imagine being a kid now. They just take
it's all over.
They take people that don't exist and they make them exist in porn world. It's very strange.
No, it was a lot harder to find when I was a kid.
No, it was
in high school. Yeah.
I'm 10 years younger than you, but
the parents' friends who had the Betamax tapes and they were up in the house for some reason.
Right.
But yeah, I had relationships, but what I'm talking about.
What are you like as a partner?
There's a big sort of arc on that. I've been horrible. I've been emotionally abusive. I've been a fuck around. I've been jealous. I've been I was a very destructive type of man and very selfish.
This is all in addiction also, correct?
Of course, yeah. I mean, the woman who got me sober, I latched onto and married. Yeah. And it became horrible. It was horrible for her and I didn't see it and she left me and I was still horrible. You can't, but that's that thing. It's like, I stayed sober, but how am I going to function? And I'm no good at intimacy now, but I'm a twice married childless person. And, I have to accept that. But, it was changing and it did get better. And I can make different choices now, but I think it comes down to that idea of love feels manipulative to me, and loving somebody is I'm afraid of disappearing. So that's a trust issue, right? But these are fundamental; those are the core emotional issues. So either and then like in order to manufacture what feels like relationship, it's usually around drama and provocation. When you have parents that are incapable of nurturing and they basically are just using you as an extension of their own emotions, and they play their emotions out with each other and themselves on you, and that's love. I mean, how are you not wary of that? It's exhausting just thinking of it.
Come here. Oh, I'm interested in you. And then, by the way, I need you to do this.
Or no, it's deeper than that. It's like I'm interested in you. I'm sorry that I did that. Do you want me to make up for it? I'd ask my parents if I could do something, and they'd say like, "What do you want us to say?" I'm like, I don't know, something like a parent. So it just the confusion and the sort of like the exhaustion is the manipulation. It's like when someone loves you, it's supposed to feel good. It's not supposed to feel like, what do you want?
Your defenses are constantly scanning for what the ulterior,
and then
he's acting like this is not his existence, but that's what's happening.
I'm trying to help people who may not have this firsthand experience.
Some people may not know what it's
like. Get a little bit more details.
I've just had to sort this out in terms of you asking me when, I realize this stuff. It's like, I don't know, like I was very, full of angry swagger for a lot of years, and I hurt a lot of people's feelings, and I broke a lot of hearts, and I don't know that it's taken years to take any sort of responsibility for that because I was completely selfish, and I talk about this lately. I really don't think I realized just the depth of what an asshole I was. And there are people that have different experiences with me. Some people would not see that. But there are points in my past as I pursued stand-up and as I lived that life of a fucking, kind of rudderless, floor-sleeping person that didn't know how to function in the world for years into adulthood because of my pursuits.
When you got sober, did you work a program? Like, are you a programming person?
Yeah, I talk about the program, publicly all the time, by qualifying, under the, I don't represent AA, but, I do talk about AA a lot, and I do it openly. I don't give a fuck about the tradition. And if any of these, old timers are going to be like, I don't give a fuck. I seriously don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck who I offend in AA
Right.
and who writes me letters about that tradition. Go fuck yourself.
Right.
That's the reason that there's only a 20% success rate and most people don't ever get to a meeting because of you fucking control freaks.
Okay, I wasn't asking in that way,
Anyway.
but no, but I appreciate that. But no, what I meant was the the path to the kind of understanding you're talking to.
I didn't get the
talking
program.
about,
Like
right.
I ended up with cocaine psychosis. I graduated college and I already had a drug habit. Like I was already pretty into coke, and I took 3 months at home off, and then I came out here and. Within months, I wrote a screenplay with the guy I was friends with in college, it was Steve Brill, and that's a long, complicated story. But nonetheless, I ended up a doorman at the Comedy Store and doing a lot of coke with, with a new father figure who was Sam Kinison. Not the best choice, but I ended up psychotic and living in a mystical landscape, and I left. Like being chased by things only I understood, and I got sober the first time. I went into rehab for a month in I guess it would be '87, and then I got out of rehab and I went to Boston to start doing comedy again. I was pursuing this thing. I didn't go to meetings. I didn't understand the steps and the traditions. It did not. I stayed sober for like a year and a half ish. But then I went out. It was not one of those situations where, like, when you go out with a head full of sobriety, it's harder. It wasn't hard, and I was, I would do that. I would go in and out,
Right.
Go to meetings for a while, not quite get it, but for years. So I've got like 23. This is gonna be 24 this year. But I got sober the first time in '88.
Yeah.
98, 2008, 2008. So it's
The
taken
year I
me
was being
30
bat mitzvahed.
Oh, nice. It's taken me almost 40 years to get 23. So whatever, man. But like it stuck. And I'm still grateful to the woman that got me sober, who I took hostage and married. And once she wants nothing to do with me.
That's the love, the death grip of love. As
Well,
I
I
call
mean,
it.
it's like, all these people that I've had, in passing experiences, like I immediately feel like totally connected to almost everybody. But, like it's very hard for me to accept that, like, I'm this mistake she made for a few years. Like as years go by, she's like, yeah, I was younger and it was just stupid and it was a terrible thing.
I do want to ask, what did you get right with Lynn?
Well, I think there was a lot going on there. We had known each other a lot of years, and it was clear that we were, drawn to each other. And I just didn't believe it. I didn't. She's very persistent and mildly obsessed, and I thought she was beautiful and fun. We really connected, but I just didn't trust it. And we were both in relationships, so we were protected by that. But then it just became relentless in terms of, she was directing my episodes of my show. She directed Glow. She directed my comedy specials. That we loved each other. And it just, through a series of events, and certain, things that I can't really talk about, I just said, well, I'm willing to surrender to this love. And if we're going to do it, we got to do it. And, you got to get out of your thing and I'll get out of my thing and let's fucking do it. So we did. So what we got right, sadly it was that, we were very excited to be together and I was not, I was willing to be loved. And I think that I made my best efforts to love her, but she was also had everything that she was also vain and and flirty and kind of charismatic, so that it honored enough of my childhood without too much. But she had eating things, but most of them were in relation to conditions she had. But she was there was she had the things that my mother had, but were healthy. She didn't have an eating disorder. She had a strict diet, right? Right. So, but what I got right, I guess, was just at least letting myself be loved and love her and receive it back. But our time together publicly, it didn't last that long. So it was all sort of in somewhat of a honeymoon stage still, and then COVID hit. But I think what I got right was the age, and also like, a kindred spirit, and somebody who was, incredibly optimistic and totally supportive. I don't think that I would be doing a lot of the things that I'm doing creatively now without her belief in me, and that sort of stuck. And I think that like I gave her a lot of joy. I think that we were able to do that for each other.
Were you joyful? Are there places that you found yourself joyful with
her?
I
gave into it. Yeah, like we took a trip to Ireland. That was great because we both had a thing for Ireland, and I was able to allow myself to be the vulnerable old man that I am with her, and we went to Spain because we heard the film we did was got an award there, and then we went to Ireland. But yeah, I mean, I was still prickly, but I am.
So the question I wanted to ask is about in this latest special, you choose to like go right there. You fucking like go right there. You go into like the belly of the grief beast.
Yeah.
And I can't even begin to imagine, first of all, like processing, I'm going to cry about your life.
Yeah.
But I can't even imagine kind of processing grief the way that you had to, meaning the way.
What, during COVID?
Well, just like everything, just like your whole life and leading up to this person and that way, and then COVID and the thing. But what I'm interested in is like, the choice and the decision to find art in it. Is that cathartic? Is it inevitable? Is it?
I think it's more inevitable, but I don't know if I was looking for catharsis. I knew that I was, alone, and it's like the devastating thing really is like you don't expect people to die, and especially not that woman, and there's nothing that's going to prepare you for that, and we were alone, and we were in that house, and she had just moved down here, and she was basically staying with me most of the time, and she just got sick, and then a week later she was dead. She just got sick. We thought it was a strep throat or something. She didn't have COVID, and we, I just got scared because we couldn't get the fever down, and then I said, we can't just wait this out anymore. She tried antibiotics, and it all happened very quickly. And then we were going to go to the doctor, and then she collapsed that night, and it was horrifying. And like I didn't really. I didn't know her family. We hadn't integrated families yet. So, if I hadn't asked her for the code on her phone when they were taking her away, I don't know what the fuck I would do. I was the guy she put down as the contact because she didn't think she was going to die. So now I'm calling the ICU, and she's unconscious for that day up until she passes. And I'm saying to the ICU nurse, give me some Sheltons. I don't know these people, and to get them in the loop. So so that experience, and then I talk about it in the special, but my brother flew out immediately, but whatever. The point is that 2 or 3 days later, when I had to do the podcast, do we do what we do when people die on the podcast? Do we repost their episode and I eulogize them? And for some reason, I was completely in shock and shattered, but I chose to do that. I did that thing, and I really believe that there was some mixture of like, well, this is what we do. My producer was like, you don't have to ever do the podcast again if you don't want to. And I'm like I decided I should show up in this state for people. It wasn't serving me. Why would I do that? It was just like, I felt like if I didn't do what we usually do, that, where would I be?
I was just going to say, where else are you supposed to go?
Right. Especially given the situation, there was no people around.
No, totally.
So, but I also thought like, this is a condition that people will be in. There's got to be something of service here if I show up like this, and do this, of me like crying in that state, and reposting the original Lynn Shelton episode, which is where we met.
Ugh.
I've never listened to it, but I chose to do it. So my instinct was that, again, like I don't know that it was selfish, and I do know that I take the actions that I take in my creativity to claim my life. So, I did that, and I don't know if it helped, but I do know that there was an outpouring of support from fans, and there was an outpouring of support from my community.
Did that feel good?
Yes.
Tell me why.
Because, it takes a lot to comfort me, and
But
believe it.
you feel comfort that way?
When you get hundreds and hundreds of emails from people that are
This is
upset.
subjective. I might get hundreds of emails. It may not comfort me.
But in that,
you're allowed your own experience, and that's what I'm asking you about.
No, but in that situation,
Yeah.
a lot of times I just blow through emails. You're great.
Right,
we love you.
right.
The show's great. But this was like, this is terrible. And I feel horrible for your loss.
I'm hearing the words you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me. Meaning I'm happy I feel good that you felt that comfort.
Well, I felt supported by my community
Yeah.
too.
It's
Like
really
people
nice.
called, and some people would
Not that I
would
expect
come
that
by.
you wouldn't. Yeah, no, I don't want you to say that. I don't want you to be like, why doesn't you think people would like
It's like, it's not like anything I've ever experienced before. This is something you have no control over, and someone is dead. Right. So, so you want to feel better, man. I mean, because you have no control over your feelings. And in people like me, that's not a common thing.
I was going to say it's sort of, the way you start, this special, it's like, it's very you. And then also it's comforting to hear that you were able to receive comfort, because I also feel like if I were to picture you going through this, I could picture you being like, well, fucking really? Like,
no, there was
of course. Like, this shit just happened. Like, it's so...
but you don't have... You don't have the you can't do that.
Right.
You don't, you're
Right.
incapacitated
Right.
by emotions to do what you usually
Right.
do.
Right.
Like, you can do it for a few minutes.
I was going to say...
You can do it for a half hour.
Right, so tell me about believe me, I read The Year of Magical Thinking after my dad died. Is that part of kind of the, that sort of, that fantasy that you live in, meaning that magical thinking that does happen? It is a thing. But, was that part of sort of where that comfort then came in? Was it sort of being able to suspend the things about Mark that are Mark in this situation?
No,
to receive that?
Because I don't think, I think the things about Mark that define who I am, on an erotic level or a public level or a guarded level is like, none of that shit's going to hold up. And it's better off it doesn't in general, that stuff, that stuff is, it becomes a strange, you become a caricature of yourself through habit, just because you're used to it. So, but none of that can stand up against overwhelming grief. You're going to return to it. I believe I've returned to it. But in terms of the magical thinking, I think that overall, it's not so much mystical in retrospect as it is wanting to stay connected to who you lost somehow, whether it's through an energy or through whatever, because the absence is profound.
There's something about grief that you touch on in a way that's very special and important. And it's not usually the way that we hear about it and think about it. And so I really...
that it's not unusual?
Well, and just like the way that, it really felt like you skydived into grief, and it's, I don't really think of you, obviously you're a comic, but you have a very, there's a philosopher quality to you. Take us back 2,000 years and 5,000 years. That's what I would go to Marc Maron for, not to make me laugh, but to make me feel and understand deeply. Right. Yeah. So it's a very different, so for you to kind of be that raw and really right in the middle of grief, it's incredibly powerful and it's heavy. It took us 2 sittings to watch this special because it's very intense.
But the truth is that by the time I did the special,
right,
I was in control.
Right.
But that was not, initially starting with that podcast.
Right. That's
I was not.
Arc. Right.
But, when I was workshopping that stuff or trying, and I write on stage, so it's a matter of riffing through stuff. And I do a residency at Dynasty Typewriter for a month.
I love Dynasty Typewriter.
But like I would do all the Tuesdays, and audience.
What was that like? Were there times when you were like, "Oh, this is not the way to deal with grief in this"?
Well, I don't know
workshop?
that. But see, the thing is, I don't know that anyone has an answer for that. But I knew that I trusted my fans enough because
Right.
I know who they are and they know who I am enough to where like I'm going to be processing, among other things, the loss. And there were times where I was doing hour and a half, 2 hours of talking, and I couldn't keep my emotions together. But the odd thing about what I see in the special and what evolved around the conversation about grief is like, I was devastated. I could not stop. I went to New Mexico to try to fucking process by myself. It's fucking COVID, man. So I flew in, I drove to Taos alone. I got an Airbnb and I'm hiking in the mountains and I'm watching flickering aspen trees and talking to Lynn. And like I go out to lunch with my buddy Devin, who I've known since I was a kid. We're eating enchiladas, and I become incapacitated by crying out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I could not control it. And I don't know if it was the talking. I just believed that, and I still believe. And I don't know if it's by virtue of my self-centeredness, I don't know, but I knew that talking about it, not unlike Shiva, not unlike anything else, that you're going to sit with this, and it is a human thing. That's what evolved was that, once I found like the sadness is going to be what it's going to be, like that hummingbird thing is a real thing. Right. So if I was to tell that story without, adding the next day, there were 4 hummingbirds. So that would still be a profound human story.
Sure.
But, that layer of grief is going to stay there.
Totally.
There's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
So to counterbalance it and find the balance between humor that, that can sustain and hold the grief, that was the trick.
Well, really, that's what it is. It's like it really elevated that emotional experience. For me, as a fan and as a listener, and as someone who also, I lost Leslie Jordan recently, and we recently had a tribute for him, and I was like, oh, all grief is connected, because like I can't get over it, and it's just like opened it up, and then I'm like, it's also my dad, and it's like it's everything. So that I think also was like so powerful because
grief, it's all around us.
Right.
That's the episode.
But I think it's important. It's important because the comics you mentioned, the style of comedy that you mentioned, and especially there's something. And this is what I want to ask you. There's a very specific ethnic quality to the way that you think and the way that you speak. And
there's one beat in that special that like it only happened twice, that beat. And it almost seems cavalier. But in that there's a couple moments in that special that 1 or 2 happened that night for the first time, and one only happened once before. And it was a weird choice, but it is truly the most Jewish joke in the special, and it's jarring, but it gives people a pass. It's that joke where my girlfriend died. It was really the worst day of my life, and I'm sure for hers too. So there was that term, but the delivery is fundamentally Jewish.
Yeah.
And it's a joke that's sort of like, whoa, but it's the logic is good, and it's not necessarily insensitive, but somehow or another, it was like the setup of that section.
100%. So this is what I wanted to ask, and I was raised, like Jackie Mason. You speak the most freely with your Jewish jokes, as the only other people that speak that freely for me are comics like Jackie Mason, who are literally standing on the basis of them being Jewish and that's not your shtick.
But consciously.
But exactly.
I pushed back against Jackie Mason when I started doing comedy.
Right.
One of my when I was a comic, a younger comic, I refused to talk about Judaism.
Right.
Because I didn't see any way to do it other than like,
right.
Jews, they go to the thing and they sit at the place, the Jew goes on vacation, you just look for what's a place to sit down, And so I could not. I was like, there's no fucking way. That guy lives in me.
Sure.
Whatever kind of person I am, this special is about anti-fascism,
right.
As much as it is anything else.
Yeah.
I've been working on this joke though that I love is that Like it happened after the special, but I say like, I'm not religious, I'm Jewish. Right. And which gets a laugh from a certain type of Jew. And like, people literally ask me, do Jews have heaven? I'm like, it's not clear. I don't. What about hell? We don't know, really. It's very complicated. There might be something.
We like to keep our options open.
I was very aware of what I was up against culturally right now, and the notion of what is risk-taking in comedy and what isn't, what is edgy and what isn't. And, like I've always been, part of that conversation. And I've been a comic that, was, doing things just to provoke and to be shocking. And, I used to be that guy. It's like, there's a story that I tell sometimes about like years ago. I think it was when Louis was doing his first Letterman, and back when we were still friends, but we were young comics, and we're walking around, and it was within days of the Oklahoma City bombing that he was supposed to do his first Letterman, and we're walking around the Lower East Side, the Village. And he's like, I don't know, man. I don't know what to do. I don't know. Do I talk about it? I don't know how to handle that news. And I'm like, of course. I'm like, you got to talk about it, dude. And not even really think about the fact that this is a 5.5 minute set, and I'm telling this comic, like, how are you not? You just going to leave that sitting there? The Oklahoma City bombing? You got to talk about it. So apparently, Louis goes to Bob Morton, the producer of the Letterman show, and he's like, I don't know how to handle the bombing. Maron says, I should address it. And Bob Morton goes, yeah, that's why Maron's not doing the show. So I was definitely of the type of comic that was a button pushing. I did heinous jokes when I was younger. But I evolved as a person. Then I started to realize that the risk is going to be personal. But I knew at some point that the only way I can guarantee originality is if I talk from me. Yeah. So once that started to happen, then the risks became different, and feeling that stuff out became different. But then, like, with this special, there's a lot of fuck you in it to comics, in the sense of, a certain type of comic where, like, if you're going to pigeonhole me as a storyteller, like, even your friend Eliza Schlesinger insulted me, but I didn't bring it up to her, and this always
Let's air it now.
Well, this always pisses her off when I do this because I've done it before and I've gotten into shit with her. But this is not, but this idea, like, she came up to me like literally recently, and she's like, you should really probably do like a more of a one-man show thing. I'm like, go fuck yourself. I'm a club comic. Just because I don't yell without timing, it doesn't mean that. I've said that to her face. So, and she's doing fine. But nonetheless, the idea of framing what I do is not stand-up. Like, I am a stand-up before I am anything else. And these are the challenges of my comedy. And this is how I decided to do stand-up. But there's nothing there. I have all the stand-up bona fides or bona fides or whatever you want to say. You can't take that away. So this was me, and fortunately it landed as such, saying like, this is all of it, man. And I dare you to tell me I'm not a stand-up comedian. Yeah.
Where
is that weird?
No.
I mean, I totally agree.
There's obviously an entire set of conversations that, I think we've all been having, and, especially since, in the last 30, 40 years about comics and
recently.
And comedy, but more recently. So more recently, the conversation has turned from not just sort of like, what's funny and who are you offending, which is, very banal. Like, I'm kind of over it.
Yeah, for sure. I think we all are. Right. That's why somehow or another my special's popping a little bit.
Well, so at what point are you able, either you or us collectively, to say, I cannot separate this person from their comedy, meaning their bad behavior, their erroneous behavior, things we don't like? I'm not asking you to be specific. But
at what point do we say we can separate it or we can't?
That we can't.
Well, I think that the expectation culturally is to say you can't separate them. Mm-hmm. But, and I don't know.
So is there a place that we can, or have we surpassed that in comedy land?
No, I do it in my mind all the time.
Right.
I mean, like I still will cite, when people criticize me for sitting down,
right,
as being something other than here. What I was saying before is relatively important to me, and I don't know that I've ever sort of framed it in that way before. That I chose stand up as my medium, and I'm doing with it what I do with it, but it's thoroughly stand-up comedy. This is how I do it. And I need to say that out loud to myself. In terms of, like, can you still listen to a Bill Cosby record? Can you, still, quote Louis like you want to? Like, Louis is mad at me for reasons that are, whatever. He feels like I betrayed him because I had to address, and I thought I addressed it well, but apparently he doesn't. Whatever. I'm willing to lose that friendship because it puts a lot of people in a weird position when something happens like that. But I think on some level, it's going to be a personal choice, and whether you do it publicly is your choice.
Right.
I mean, you can not forgive somebody for what they did or believe that they did wrong and still, at least frame their work in a different place. I think we do it all the time. I guarantee you that at least 75% of the creative people that you love and respect are fucking monsters.
Oh, I think more than 75%.
Yeah. So, like, a lot of them no one knows. But whatever, there's a nature of the...
Yeah, it's a new thing that we actually know what people are thinking, doing, and saying when they're not on a stage.
Yeah, I thought when that first started happening with Entertainment Tonight, it was over. Like, I was like, this is going to be a problem. There's no mystery anymore.
Everybody knows when it's my birthday because of Entertainment Tonight.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a personal decision for yourself. Like, I am able, like, I find myself, talking about my friendship with him more, and certainly there's been periods in my life where advice was given, and there are heroes of mine in comedy. Look, I speak freely about Sam Kinison, who had a profound impact on me at a very, young age in a way, in my 20s, and was really terrible to me in a lot of ways. But he was a monster, and he was a public monster, and same with Dice. Like, I brought up Dice the other day in a fairly compassionate way, and I got an email from some women and like, that guy, and I'm like, look, man, that guy's an old Jew who I see around, and I get a kick out of him. I know, like, a lot of people thought the character went too far. But like that story I told about Dice, like that moment I had with him that I can't even, like, I never want to not think about it. Like, I'm standing there with that guy. I don't know if you know him. No. But he's Dice. He's like, hey, how you doing? What is it with the, and he's all done up and he's got the thing going. But like, but he's like that.
It's like most of my family in Queens.
Right. But I get he offended a lot of people. I understand all that. But but this is my community, right? And I've seen Louis, and he was actually pleasant to me recently, even though he hates my guts now. But nonetheless, so I see Dice in the hallway, and I'm talking to him because I get a kick out of him. There's no way you can't be like, Maron, is it the thing? Like, so we're standing there, and this kid comes up to me. He says, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mark, I was going to email you, and I just want to say, like, you changed my life, and you really helped me in a dark place, and like, I just really... I wanted to tell you that. I really wanted to thank you for, really, helping me in my life. And the guy walks away, and Dice, he just cocks his head and goes, I never get that. What I get is, you're why I got in trouble. You're why I had to move out of the house. You're why my life is a disaster.
Different legacies.
Just a different side of that coin.
But the self-awareness of it was just so beautiful. Like, I never get it's just like this beat, and he just was right on it. I love comedians, really, but I also hate them. What are you going to do? I love myself as much as I hate myself. Like, I wrote a line once. It's like, when I hate myself, I hate everyone who has ever liked me. So
what you said about relationships is, especially with people that you like and feel attachment to, you will not break up with them. You will treat them so badly that their only option is to be like, get out of my face. I want to drive a screwdriver into your eyeball. And then you were like, all right, if that's how you want it, but I really love you. Don't leave me.
The worst.
No, it's not the worst. It's not the worst. It
makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot. No, but honestly, like in all sincerity, it makes a lot of sense. That is the depth of complexity that you are absolutely saying. Like, this is what happens when, I call it the scaffold, whatever you want to call it, when there's not that structure that lays down the foundations of the things that we need as primates. human, secure attachment,
Right.
knowing someone's there, knowing that your needs are going to be met, like all those basic things that are supposed to happen that often don't.
Yeah, but like I think that ultimately, if we're being proactive in helping people, you should have the courage to be honest and break up with people if you need to. It's just
Was
I
that
don't
the
know.
public service announcement from
Yeah.
Marc Maron?
Yeah, just step up. I want out. This is over.
If you
also-
know you want out, don't get married.
I'm not getting married again.
No.
No.
I don't know. I've been divorced 10 years. Don't ask me.
No, I don't even really want
just-
anyone living in my house.
Well, that's the thing. I like things exactly the way I want them, and it's very.
I didn't. A bit that did make the special is like, look, I know that I'm a selfish person and that like I'm have problems with intimacy and a little paranoid and I'm difficult. I know that about myself. I don't know why I need someone in my house telling me that every couple of days.
I wanted to ask about the. Obviously, you have found a way to find not just humor in grief, but to get to like a real heart of grief.
Yeah.
But there's also something about your cynicism that is it's very endearing. There's a way that I feel comforted when you talk about our inevitable demise
Right.
that I don't feel comforted about when it's not you delivering
Not funny
it.
enough, I think.
Well, yeah, it's a lack of panic, probably.
Well, maybe.
Yeah. No, I mean, look,
Do you not feel panic about it?
Well, I mean, I feel better and I feel seen if I can say you guys know that this is true, right?
Right.
And whatever we're doing, it's just to placate,
Right.
these feelings. And look, I don't know how long it's going to take. It always feels like it's going to be soon, but then all of a sudden, it's not so soon.
Right.
When the sky was on fire and Trump was president, the world didn't end.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But now I'm like more concerned about like these people that are preparing for the apocalypse because I'm like, why would you want to live?
Right.
And and if you do live, now it's just going to be everyone's just going to be those assholes who prepared.
Do you watch The Last of Us?
No,
Because it's happening.
I'm not going to do that.
No, I'm saying like everything that I'm watching, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is just literally what we're gonna we're preparing for.
But
Maybe.
you're reading about the Colorado River crisis
Yeah.
and the water issue?
Yeah. Well, that's like I've applied for permanent residency in your country, and I just want to get it.
Have they accepted you? Did you
Not
get your...
yet.
Not yet?
Apparently, there's a real backlog from COVID and from actual refugees.
Yeah.
Like I can't
They
be
take
like,
up a lot of
hey, can't you
space.
process? Go enough with the Afghanis. I'm a celebrity.
Do you feel hopeful at all for the future, or are we just fucked?
I don't know if what I experience is hope, and I imagine some part of how I'm handling my own anxiety around things is, I wouldn't say it's denial, but it's some sort of rationalization, because ultimately. Oh, the two books that I was going to tell you about, the book that changed my entire perception as a template around the type of parents I had is a book called The Fantasy Bond by Robert Firestone.
Oh, yes. I've heard of this.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's good.
I thought you were going to say Trapped in the Mirror.
No, I tried to read that, couldn't read it.
Okay.
Couldn't get through Trapped in the
All
Mirror.
right. What was the
What
other
was the
one?
other one?
Well, The Denial of Death, I think, is a good general sort of...
Light reading.
That's just light reading for,
It is. Well,
that's
the
your
point I
Shabbos
was
reading.
making is that, everybody needs to attach themselves to something bigger than themselves in order to find meaning, but also just to not be screaming and crying all day
Right.
long. So,
Whether the world is ending or not.
that's how people survive.
There's
People
a-
thought the world was ending
a long
since the
time.
beginning of the world.
Yeah.
This is
But it actually is ending now, and we're the cause of it. Before it was just a lack of understanding about natural phenomenon. But
there's a Kabbalistic notion. What you just said, there's a Kabbalistic concept that like
I'm the living
we're all-
Kabbalah.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. No, the notion is that like there are things that we have to do to survive every single day to not go completely crazy.
Right.
And that the notion of whatever this, next age is, which, I'm not trying to be religious about it, but whatever a shift in consciousness might look like would actually mean more of an acceptance of the reality of our world instead of this like fantasy land, which in many cases, Christianity sort of took a very different perspective on what this next world would be like. But the actual like mystical concept is that like we would all be awake to the suffering that we're all living in. And there's a certain amount of denial that has to exist for us to like wake up every morning and feed the cats and like take your kids to school or not have kids, whatever. Okay. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. We are just so thrilled to get to hold space with you here, and thank you.
Thank you for holding the space. Very, very nice to meet you guys, and I had a good time.
Tell people where to find stuff.
Oh, HBO, the special From Bleak to Dark, and WTFpod.com is where you can get the podcast, but you can get it anywhere you get the podcast.
All right. From our breakdown to the one we hope you never have, we'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or two.